So the objectives of this today's presentation is to describe what is meant by sex of a person and define and describe gender, then to describe the difference between sex and gender and how gender roles affect the well-being of young persons, and to measure to mitigate the differences related to gender roles, define what is gender-based violence, and look at dating violence. So, the basic concepts that we would be touching on is difference between gender and sex, then unhealthy gender concepts affecting the well-being of young persons, and how do we address the issues related to gender, and how do we respond to gender-based violence. So first, sex. What is meant by sex? Sex refers to the biological and physical characteristics of an individual. So in summary, simply it means biological sex, males and females. So then what is gender? Gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of the women and men. And these characteristics are described as norms, roles, relationships between groups of women and men. So, gender refers to the social definitions and social expectations associated with being a male or a female. And there's another word called intersex. Intersex means this is the term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of a male or a female. So he or she can't be categorized into a male or a female because it's not the typical characteristics of a male or a female. For an example, if a person is born appearing to be a female from the outside, but having mostly male typical anatomy inside, it is called intersex, and vice versa. Then what is transgender? Transgender, or we can call it transsexual. So transgender denotes or relates to a person whose sense of personal identity and the gender does not correspond with their birth sex. So there is non-correspondence. The birth sex is different and their personal identity of gender is different. That is why these people are called transgender. Then if we talk more about gender, gender roles, as I said earlier, are socially constructed, and they are constructed by the society based on an extension of biologically determined social functions. Now, the social functions which are normally determined biologically would be extended further by this socially constructed norms of gender. So, gender roles are usually centered on the conception of femininity and masculinity. And because they are being constructed by the society, they are taught norms and behaviors. They are not born behaviors. They are taught norms and behaviors. And because the society develops it, this varies from society to society and also from time to time. And when individuals or groups do not conform to the gender norms developed by the society, they face stigma, discrimination, then social exclusion, and also punishment. And these things adversely affect the health of the individual or the groups. So, if we compare masculinity with femininity, so physically, a male should be strong, brave, athletic, and a female should be caring, submissive, and in the functional aspect, the male should be the provider, the breadwinner, and the female the receiver and the nurturer. Sexually, the male should be sexually aggressive, and there is no concern for virginity in the society with regard to males, and single status is acceptable. On the other hand, with the female, sexually should not be aggressive, and the virginity before marriage, the society expects virginity before marriage, and being single is not that acceptable in the society. With regard to work, sometimes they get higher wages in some societies and more men in management. And females get lower wages and less women in management. But when we consider this in our country, in the government sector, there is no difference between the wages, but sometimes it happens in the private sector or in the labor sector. So, emotionally, the male is supposed to control his emotions and his passions. He's not supposed to express them. But the female should be emotional, should be sympathetic, receptive, and should have high language skills. Intellectually, the male should be logical, intellectual, rational, and practical, and female is considered as irrational by the society. Then the interpersonal relationship, male should be the leader, should dominate, and should be independent. The female should be dependent. So, social norms, the male should maintain the ego, and the female should maintain the relationship. With regard to politics and economics, economic growth is of high priority for the male, and conflicts should be resolved through force. And on the other hand, for the female, environment is of high priority, and conflicts should be resolved through negotiation. With regard to religion, normally the society expects only men to be praised, but with regard to femininity, both men and women would be accepted as praise. So, the definition of gender, as I said before, is the socially constructed roles, behavior, activities, attributes that a particular society considers appropriate for men and women. So, gender role is a set of social and behavioral norms which are generally considered as appropriate for either a man or a woman. So, there are two sets, one role for the man and the other role for the woman. And within a social or interpersonal relationship, for the relationship also there is a role and norms developed by the society. So, when we talk about gender, there is certain terminology that we should be aware about. So, one terminology is gender equality. Gender equality means equality, the word, the meaning of the word also tells us that it is a condition where everything is equal. Women and men participate as equals, have equal access to resources, equal opportunities. And there's another word called gender equity. Equity means fair and justice treatment according to the requirement or need. So that is, according to the requirement, there would be justice, that is equity. So by looking at this picture, you would be able to understand the meaning of the two words. With regard to equality, the resources would be allocated equally. So although the need is different, the three boys are of three different heights, but they have been allocated the same bench with the same height. So only the person, the tallest person would only be able to pluck the fruits. But on the other hand, with regard to equity, they have been supplied with benches according to their heights. So all the three would be able to reap the benefit of the fruits. So equity is better than equality, because first we should reach equity, we should look for equity, but when we reach equity, knowingly or unknowingly, we would be reaching equality. Then there's another word, gender stereotyping, which is really important. This is the image or the frame or construct which has been created by the society for the man and the woman. So the man or the woman should behave and should practice according to the construct or the image constructed by the society. So as I said before, those who comply with the stereotype or the image is rewarded by the society. Those who do not would be rejected or penalized. So if we compare gender with sex, these are the differences. Sex is universal and biologically constructed, but gender is not universal. It's different it differs with the society, because it's been developed or constructed by the society. And gender roles are, and the behavior is learned and performed. But with regard to sex, it's inborn. And the status, we look at the status, sex, the status is ascribed, but with regard to gender, it's achieved. Gender changes with time, but sex is not subjected to change. So with regard to gender, we use the terms masculine and feminine. With regard to sex, it's male and female. So sex most of the time cannot be changed because it's permanent and it's biologically determined. But gender can be addressed if there are any negative aspects of it. If there are any negative issues, it can be addressed and it can be changed. And with regard to sex, power and privileges are not equally distributed among males and females. There is a similarity between the two, because here also power and privileges are not equally distributed among gender, but here the difference here is the difference or inequity had been developed by the society with regard to gender, but in the sex it is already biologically determined difference between the man and the woman. So if we look at the health inequalities related to gender, and if we compare males and females, the life expectancy is lower compared to females in males, and injuries would be higher in males compared to females. Toxic occupational exposures would be higher in males. Mortality again is higher in males. and social discrimination would be higher in females, because that is how the society wants it. So impact on gender, especially on women, because of this gender roles and norms and the behavior patterns, how does it impact on the women? One impact is suppression of economic gains, because they are not supposed to get engaged in economic activities. Lack of access to social networks, they are not supposed to move in the society. Limited participation in political arena. Lack of access to information and education. Then investment and nutrition is only mainly at the household level. And because of their roles, the time they can use for health services or others for their use is minimum. So they tend to neglect their selves. Social impacts of ill health would be seen among them, and lack of self-confidence and lack of self-esteem, because they are not confident enough to make a decision for themselves. How does it affect on men? Impact of gender on men. Because of their gender role as men, they are under enormous pressure, because they have to be successful in their work and they have to earn high incomes and also provide for the family. And they are not expected to express their emotions, and they are not expected to request for help, right? So, and this is called as boy code, and this has psychological consequences. And also they would be exposed to occupational risk factors. They would be vulnerable to occupational risk factors. So how does this gender inequality affect the reproductive health of women? Feminine identity is centered on motherhood and the ability to relate to others. So that is what is expected of a woman. She should be a mother and she should have a good relationship with the other members of the family. So this leads to limitations in her capacity to make own decisions, to act in her own self-interest. Always she has to look at the interest of the, or consider the interest of the other members, family members. So their lack of freedom to make decisions about herself, their selves, would even regarding her sexuality or her reproduction. So that may give to psychological and health costs. And this would lead to limited female autonomy, because they can't make a decision. So sometimes they are being pressurized into early marriage, early pregnancy, and to have large families, because they can't decide on their own for themselves. And also this expected gender role prevent them from exercising sexuality with autonomy and to detach it from procreation. The use of contraceptives by men is relatively low in comparison to women. Most contraceptive technologies and programs are targeting women more than men. So it had become a responsibility of the woman to practice contraception. The lower ability of women to exercise power and also to access resources in the household might lead to nutritional problems because they don't have power and they don't have access to resources and they are in charge of the nutrition of the family. So this might lead to nutritional problems. And also, the societal standards that tolerate extramarital sexuality only for men leave women vulnerable to sexually transmitted diseases.